Yeah, so back in 2001, I needed a domain name. And that's really where we figured out, as an Ayurvedic practitioner and as a yoga teacher, I should make myself somewhat accessible, and came up with a name that people knew. So really, my background was in Ayurveda, and I'd become an Ayurvedic practitioner. And before then, before I went into Ayurveda, which is this healing science from India, I was in international environmental politics and policy. I was a global environmental activist. And I in high school, I really kind of woke up to that, like, how we think matters, how we act as humans. It matters, that the future of the planet and all the species really depends on, as a global species of humans, like what we do and how we think. And so that really led me pretty hardcore into like the Save the Earth movement as a high schooler, and then continued that through college. Went to international environmental politics and policy, and got to a place where after college I was working for the International Institute of Energy Conservation in Washington, D.C., and realized after a year there working on global projects that were spreading energy efficiency and renewable energy information to developing countries, just realized like humans needed to become more conscious. And that going from the policy side was more of a reactive way of going about it. So at that point, I jumped ship. I was like, I gotta go think and figure out more. Like, as I devote my life to a path, really understand like where will my energy be most effective? Like, where will my life be most effective? And so that brought me to a study of Ayurveda, which is really a study of how we thrive as humans, and a study of how we become more conscious as human beings. The more conscious a person becomes, the more their sphere of care extends beyond their own personal needs, into their family needs, into their community's needs, and into their ecosystem needs. And then it starts to go beyond countries, and then it starts to go beyond continents, and people start to develop more and more global care. And that helps them make better decisions. So they understand like, oh, my little choices are having an impact. My little choices are developing culture. And that's really what brought me into Ayurveda. Now, at the time, yoga was quite popular. I was in Ayurveda school outside of, about a few hours outside of San Francisco. And there's a really good yoga teacher training program in San Francisco. And so I went there. I decided to do both. And as I emerged as a yoga teacher and Ayurvedic practitioner, I knew from just my background, like I'd already had big thoughts. I'd already traveled the world. I'd already done a lot. And I was really looking at like, where can I make the most impact with Ayurveda and yoga? And what I started doing was these pop-up workshops in San Francisco, where I just teach a couple-hour workshop on daily routines of a yogi. What I found was that as popular as yoga was becoming around the turn of the century in San Francisco, most yoga teachers and most yoga teacher training programs didn't understand the habits of yogis. And the habits of yogis comes, it just came as part of yoga, as a lifestyle in India. But as we imported yogic traditions into the United States, we just took what we wanted. Very American of us, just, said, hey, we want to have those parts of it, the aerobic parts of it, and leave behind the habits, these counterculture, somewhat radical habits that are very much against the culture of modern Western culture. And yet they're the backbone of Ayurveda, these basic day-to-day habits. Like, how do you live your day-to-day life so that your body can thrive, so that your mind can focus, so that your spirit can soar? And if we live against these rhythms, these habits are just simply based on the rhythms of nature. If we live against the rhythm, what happens is we experience dis-ease. Dis-ease in first spirit, where we just sense that we're not living our life on purpose. We're maybe not in sync with how we want to spend time, right? We find ourselves not doing what we want to do a lot of the time. Soon what happens is dis-ease of the mind, where we're experiencing a lot of mental and emotional, on the negative side, where we're whether we're anxious or angry or depressed, the three main categories, right? Where we're just like not experiencing a lot of the positive emotions that come from an aligned, subtle body anatomy. When our subtle body is aligned and thriving, we experience a lot of positive emotions. We experience a lot of opportunity-oriented thoughts of like, oh, I want to do this next, and I can make that happen. We experience a lot of empowerment. And then disease of the body, right? Where we actually have symptoms, whether like we're carrying too much weight, whether we just wake up and feel blah and tired and not experiencing like a lot of energy or excitement about the day ahead. And this all comes back to our simple daily habits. Now, this was a precursor to yoga. Like if you were going to practice yoga back in the old days, you had to live the habits for a couple of years. You had to like hang out with a guru and demonstrate through basically work study, through like keeping the place going and chop wood, carry water, servicing the other students. You started to get entrained into the lifestyle and aligned into deeper rhythms. And then you would basically go through what is called dikshas or initiations, where eventually it's like, okay, now your body is ready for the practices of yoga. Your body's purified enough that like you won't, just do these practices and then go pollute yourself, and do these practices and then go pollute yourself. So when yoga came to the West, it was like, oh, forget all that, forget all the culture. That's really the backbone of yoga. So when I had studied Ayurveda, became an Ayurvedic practitioner, and realized that, the habits, if people didn't have the habits, like that's what I would do as an Ayurvedic practitioner. I just like go on a treasure hunt of like, which of their daily habits is most out of alignment with the habits of yogis? Is it their bedtime? Is it when they're eating? Is it how they're eating? Is it have much more to do with their spirit, like just how they're not living their own life? They're living a life that someone else prescribed for them or culture prescribed for them. They bought into what Vishaan Lakhiani calls the rules, the bullshit rules of life, and they're not living their own life. Like, why is this person not thriving? And I would simply just look at their daily habits. Like, which of their habits was most in the violation of the habits of yogis? And let's just start there, right? And what I found over time was that it was really an effective way to help people faster, which was not the way I was trained as an Ayurvedic practitioner. As an Ayurvedic practitioner, I was taught to like do this long intake and understand their constitution, their unique digestion, their mental, emotional, spiritual state of being, and then to design special herbalized formulas and the special yoga practice and special. And so that they would, emerge with like this really unique self-care program. And this is how I was trained. This is what I was taught. But what happened is it was like too hard. It was too hard often for people to do the things because their habits were so ingrained. Their current habits, current modern culture habits were so ingrained that adding a few little things either wouldn't make a difference or were too hard for them to do. So over time, I started teaching group courses. My first one was the Yogi Detox in 2002. And I brought a small group, 5 people in my Ayurvedic medicine yurt in Teutonia, Idaho. I was like, we're going to do a detox. I needed some money in the off season, needed to make a living. I was like, I'm going to do a detox anyways. I might as well get some group support for myself and charge them for my expertise and guidance. And so I created little ebooks and recipes, and we did yoga sessions together, and I guided this really small group of people through a 3-week process, and we had tremendous results. And then they wanted to do it again, and it got popular. So a couple of years later, I've taught this course every spring and fall since 2002. And it started in this little town in Idaho. Soon I was teaching over in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, then in Sun Valley, like just bringing groups of people through a group process together. And we were having these insane results. Like people would change their lives after these 3-week experiences. And my clients that I was developing these highly individualized practices and protocols and programs and herbal formulas for, stocking 100 Ayurvedic herbs and making specialized, they were not progressing at nearly the same clip. And I was like, what's going on here? Like it's cheaper for people to come to my detoxes. Like, they're not spending as much money. And the changes that, like, the progress that they make seems to last. So I had to look at that. I really had to look at it from a place of efficacy, you know, not just like, how am I going to make a living? But really, like, what am I doing that's effective? And I feel like this is really where a lot of holistic practitioners and yoga teachers don't put enough of their thinking into. Is like, what's working? What's not working? And how do I change my career model based on what's getting people results the fastest? So I started to do that because I noticed that, wow, these people that are doing these group detoxes, I started asking myself, like, why is that working? Like, what are they really changing that's lasting? And of course, it came back to the habits. They had adjusted their habits in alignment with nature's rhythm so that their body could thrive, so that their mind could focus, so that their spirit could soar. And they started to basically realign their life in terms of what would really work for their body. And often it was drastic. I mean, some people had to, you know, over time, leave relationships, leave jobs, like make big changes because they realized that some of the patterns that they had fallen into required really big changes for them to be in alignment with who they wanted to be next. So I started to not be afraid of that, of the big changes people had to make. Some people just need small changes. Sometimes whole families got on board. Sometimes extended families got on board and started to eat dinner a little earlier, started to unplug a little earlier at night, started to wake up earlier and do movement in the morning, and started to just naturally fall into rhythm. So we saw that even more than people needing to make massive changes. So at that point, I understood the power of dynamic groups, that when you put people in a group and you have them living aligned habits, you get results much faster than working with people one-on-one. If it was normal for the group, so these habits might not be normal for a person coming into the group and their everyday life and their current scene and the people that they're associating with and people they're living with, people they're working with. It might not be, these habits that yogis do might not be normal in that group. And so just giving them the habits to do in their own culture, in their own microculture, wasn't very effective. That's why the one-on-one didn't work. Just like telling someone what they should be doing each week and coaching them one-on-one through it didn't work. But when they came into a group where it was normal to eat an earlier or later dinner, where it was normal to wind down and not be on email at 10 o'clock at night, where it was normal to get 8 hours of sleep and be in bed, lights out by 10, and to want to wake up for the dawn, where that was normal, results skyrocketed. If people could make the changes so much more quickly. So at the same time, what was happening as I was learning all that is I became successful financially. As I decided to work online. I decided to live the kind of lucrative lifestyle that I felt like was in alignment with who I was as a person and the kind of value I could bring to the world and what I really wanted to experience for myself. A lot of my friends are doctors and lawyers from growing up, from college and beyond. I was like, well, they're not any smarter than I am, so I might as well make a great living. And the beauty of the internet, being the internet, is I found I could connect more with people who really could connect with me, who like really wanted to learn from me, and that they, you know, were willing to use technology to do so. So to kind of force that, I ended up buying a condo in Mexico. I wanted to force myself out of just working locally. I wanted to like push myself into a lucrative lifestyle, like really living the lifestyle I felt like I wanted to live, just as a challenge to myself, not to just fall into what everybody else was doing or what was actually much easier for me to do at the time. And so the other part of that was I realized over the course of time that like I inspire people. And I realized that, you know, part of that was how much I ski and surf and do the things that I want to do. People often say no to themselves. Women in particular are often like, I'll do that later. Men will often do like, I'll do that when I retire. Then I'll really live the life of my dreams. And I realized a huge part of yoga, this path of freedom, essentially, this path of Svatantriya, or waking up to the ultimate freedoms that you have as a human being. The part of that is doing what you want to do and making that happen now, like making that happen sooner. So you don't keep delaying desire. You actually engage with like, where is my vitality leading me? So it was leading me to the surf breaks in Mexico. So we bought the condo. And my friends are watching this, my friends that are yoga teachers and holistic practitioners, and they're like, how are you doing this? Like, you get great results for your people, your clients, like they love working with you, and you get to go surfing when you want, and you get to go skiing when you want, and you get to be, location independent. And that's when I realized that like a huge part of the lucrative lifestyle and helping people actually align to life purpose, helping people make decisions that are in alignment with their deeper dreams, that was also a big part of what in yoga or Ayurveda we would call dharma, or really living your life on purpose and doing it not just for yourself, but for the benefit of those that you are most pulled to benefit. And so at that point, all these things started to come together. I was teaching Ayurveda online. That was the most interesting conversation to me, is what started to happen in the Living Ayurveda course. And in the Living Ayurveda course, it's like, how do you become a self-healer? Like, how do you learn Ayurveda for yourself and for your family so that you can take even better care of you? And those people graduating from that, they were like, they were being asked, they were getting such great results. Like, they were looking vibrant, and a lot of them, had come in with autoimmune diseases and were just much more healthy and vibrant and thriving. And so their people in their lives were like, can you help me? And they had realized that they didn't want to become an Ayurvedic practitioner. Like, they didn't want to learn Ayurveda for, to like prescribe these really specialized herbal formulas and to do this elaborate one-on-one work with people. That they wanted to learn just to help people with the way that they had been helped the most, which was, again, back to the habits. How do you help people change their habits, especially when they're living in a microculture of their friends and family that have habits that are really going against their body and going against a focused mind and going against a soaring spirit? And so that's when the yoga health coaching was born, is I realized that, from the yoga teachers and wellness pros that were asking me, like, how do you do this lifestyle? How do you make money in this industry? And then from the Living Ayurveda course members who are asking, hey, how do I help my friends and family? Like, people are asking me what to do. I merged all of that together and created a very simple coaching program based on the habits of yogis that I write about in my book called Body Thrive, which is based on Body Thrive habits. How do you actually get people enrolled and engaged? How do you get them invested in themselves so that they will take action, so that they will show up to the group, so that they will actually make changes in their life? And that was the beginning of yoga health coaching in 2012. And that has just grown and grown into a global career path for all different kinds of holistic practitioners. We have allopathic doctors and nurses in there as well, who are just looking at, like, how do I get better results for the people I'm working with? How do I help people thrive in their bodies and focus their mind and live the kind of life that they want to live? And what we found is that there's these elements. Dynamic groups is one. Like, people need a group where it's normal to have the habits that are counterculture to everything else that's going on out there. The eating late, the staying up late, the eating too much, the not moving enough in the day, having a sedentary lifestyle, like all this stuff. How do you get people to shift? Well, you need the dynamic group. The other thing, through studying behavioral science, that was confirmed, is something that I knew but was confirmed, was you need people to have skin in the game. If they're not invested, they're gonna just look for like the easier way out when the going gets tough, right? As soon as something in their life like is gonna pull them back into what's not working for them, they're gonna go that route unless they've got skin in the game. So how do you get people to have skin in the game? And this is where the wellness pros, the yoga teachers they're really weak in how you actually help people invest in themselves. How you package your dynamic group to get results, and then how do you enroll people into that, where they have enough skin in the game, they've invested enough money to be like, this matters to me. I'm gonna show up, I'm gonna fall through, and because I'm gonna follow through, I can expect to get the results that you say I can get, right? And that's really what we do in yoga health coaching, is we help people with those three. We help wellness pros and yoga teachers live a more lucrative lifestyle, align their business model to one that actually they can thrive in as practitioners, where they can live the habits, where they're not posting on social media at 10 p.m. trying to fill their next workshop, but where they're actually living the habits, experiencing better health for themselves, and where they have a business model to enroll people in dynamic groups at a high enough price point where their people show up, where their people have skin in the game. Because at that point, they can get just really unbelievable results for the people that they work with. Yeah, so that's a little bit of where we're at. Where it's going next, this book coming out, The Master of You, has so much to do with living your life on purpose. Like, what are the deeper dreams that you have? Maybe some of them that you had to sweep under the rug given life circumstances and different situations and different choices that you made that created other choices that kind of suppressed some really deeper desires for you and your life purpose, or what, again, the yogis would call dharma. Like, what are you here to do in this lifetime? And I embedded Ayurveda, the 5 elements of Ayurveda. We take your space, like how do you form your space? So space is ether, it's akasha, it's your home, it's all of the environments that you shape, that you create a vibration in. Is that vibration actually pulling your deeper dream forward? Or is it actually like keeping the old thoughts and the old patterns in your head? A lot of people have issues with addiction, whether it's like addiction to being busy or addiction to eating too much, drinking too much, smoking too much, buying too much, spending time with people that really don't help them feel great too much, like whatever it is. Like, we have these deeply ingrained patterns, and our environment, there's great research in behavioral science that shows that however our environment we've architected, whether you look at how have you architected your refrigerator when you open it, or your wardrobe, or your home when you walk in, that is reinforcing whatever habits you currently have. So if we want to become someone we've never been before, if we want to live our deeper dreams, we start by architecting our environment with the person that we want to become. So it's a wild experience where you actually get to like, oh, like, who do I really want to become? Well, how would that person use this home? How would that person stock their fridge? What habits would that person have? And that's where we start, is we start with space element. Then we go to earth element, which is the body. Body has 3 basic rhythms. Rhythms around sleep, rhythms around nourishment, and rhythms around movement or exercise. And we just get those 3 rhythms in alignment with Thrive. It's like a crash course on Body Thrive. And then from there, we go to vision. So at that point, when your space is in alignment and you have powerful body rhythms that build your own resilience and immunity and strength, you start to actually be able to see a lot more clearly, like where you could go. That game is now different. Like, you're way more crystal clear on like, that's actually where I want to go. We know these like little 3-degree pivots when you're setting a vision have a huge impact on where you end up. So vision becomes so much more clear. The fire that gives us light, that gives us the power to see, becomes clear. And as we see where we want to go, what comes up is like, well, what's going to stop us? Like, what's going to get in the way? What always gets in the way? And we often start there. And then we also look at just strategy. So this is where I bring in a lot of strategy I've learned from business on how to grow $1 million plus year revenue business. I bring in business strategy, and it's like, well, if you set a goal, you have to look at strategy. You have to develop very good strategy. And that hard work of developing the best possible strategy so that you don't get subterfuged by past patterns or by weaknesses that you have, that you get very, very clear. You get very, very real on what could stop you. And you emerge with 3 very powerful strategies. And from there, that's all part of fire. Then we go to air element. And air element is how you use time. Because your future self, the one that's in alignment with the deeper dreams that you have, uses time in an entirely different way than your current self. And it's always that way. They have a different calendar. They are talking to different people, sometimes some of the same people as well, having different conversations. Their strengths are actually different. Their knowledge, wisdom, their assets are different. So we look at that, like, how does that person use time? We all have 24 hours in a day, right? Hopefully 8 of it's sleeping. Hopefully 8 of it's doing just fun stuff and what you want to be doing. And 8 of it's for your life's work. So really looking at like, how do you design your 24 hours in alignment with who you're becoming? Well, that's where strategy, that's where rubber meets the road with strategy. And you get to test it out. Like, did you have the right strategies? Well, let's see. Let's put it in the field of time. So a lot of question comes up like, well, why is time air element? So air element is, if you blow, there's movement from here to there. You can feel the wind. Movement in yoga and our Ayurvedic philosophy is always measured time. And even if you think of like light, like what is the speed of light? Well, it's how much distance light travels from here to there. It's like the wind, movement from here to there. So air element and time are synonymous. If we start to realize like, oh, am I disempowered in air? Do I have the vision? Do I have the strategy? But I don't change my calendar, right? Like it'll never happen. You'll never wake up one day and be like, wow, I made that happen. And usually when that happens, you're well on the way to your next dream and you get the system. So what we find happens with air element and time is it basically messes with everything. People start to realize where they're out of integrity, where they say what they want, but they don't actually do what they want. And this brings us into water element. So water element, water has depth. Water is cloudy, it's heavy compared to air and fire, where we've been playing in the last two elements. And water element brings us into our own depth. It brings us into where our integrity is a little murky. We say we're going to do something, we say we want something, but then we don't structure our time in alignment with that. All of a sudden we can see all of those issues, and we can see the issues behind those issues and the issues behind those issues behind those issues. And that's what brings us into depth. This has a lot to do with goddess mythology, and how in goddess mythology, there's, instead of climbing the mountain, the goddess mythology, you actually go to hell. You go to your depth. You find where you're misaligned, and you digest that. You get into your own murk and you look at it with eyes wide open. In that, deeper transformation happens. When that transformation happens, it actually gives you the rocket fuel to soar, to actually hit your goals. So that's the 5 elements of Master of You, and it's really the future of Yogahealer. That was a very long answer to your question.